Good afternoon. My name is Tim Creamer. I'm the chair of the Voorheesville Curriculum Committee. It is May 17th, 2023, and the committee is convening to talk about, to follow up on our elementary reading program recommendation. We have with us here today Superintendent McCree, a curriculum director. I'm not sure I got the full title. Karen Conroy. We have Robin Willoughby from the board. Barbara Owens is on her way and hopes to be here momentarily. And we have Kelly Lindrum. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And she is the president of the BTA. We are all members of the committee, so I'm going to turn it over to Frank and get us started as to where do we go from here.
Okay. So, as you know, I tabled the reading program conversation for the board and went back to the literacy committee to understand their request. Kelly was present. So at any point in time, Kelly, please feel free to jump in. So the committee came back and I met with the full group and we kind of went through their recommendation. Wanted to hear their voice, what their concerns were with it, what their concerns were without having a program, where we are now, and if there were other programs they wanted to look at, and just really have an overview conversation. Kelly, did I miss anything? Okay. So I kind of can tell you where it all kind of started. What they told me again is what we already know. We haven't had a reading program here. One of the teachers, Tammy Hammis, is on the group. How many years here?
129.
Yeah, and she gave us a long history of not having program and kind of walked us through that on understanding how important it is to have a program. You know, they talk a lot about the phonics aspect of not having phonics. We've added phonics over the past couple of years. So that is new to the district in past 2 years, 3 years?
3 years, I think.
Right, and new in the idea of just teaching phonics.
No, when I taught first grade, we did have a
We had
phonics
phonics,
component,
we
but
did.
anyway,
Right.
we
But
do
it's
have a
become
phonics component that people are using and finding to be very
Right.
successful with the students.
Right, so they have a couple different ones that they're using now.
As a consistent program.
Yeah, as a consistent program.
We
Fine.
Well, I think it was first grade did this.
As Tammy said, it wasn't consistent across grade levels or even within grade levels. I remember that was one of the
Yes,
conversations.
yes.
Yeah, and that was a big takeaway from the meeting because I asked everybody to share and everybody kind of shared their viewpoints and opinions. And one thing that came up is there was an inconsistency within the departments of how they're teaching reading, right? Not that they're not teaching reading, not that they're not doing a good job. I want to be very clear on that. It's just that the consistency of how they're doing it was very different. Hence, a program will allow them to have that consistency across the board. So we kind of went through that component. I talked about them with the survey and the survey they were given, and asked them how they felt about what they're doing currently. And then we really talked about Wonders and how they felt about it. I went around the table, and the majority, I believe, everybody, correct, Kelly, said that Wonders.
The rest of the
Yeah,
sentence first.
everybody said Wonders was a program they endorsed.
Yes.
So, and each person said they had, they all gave their positives on it. One person brought up the rigor aspect because that was something from the 2017 version that we saw that was lower. That was one that they said is very, very high because that's a newer version of rigor. So a rigor is really high. One teacher said they're using with their highest win block. Win is what I need. So those are the highest level students that were in her group of the grade. So basically kind of like a level learning work area. And she says that rigor and those lessons are even higher for those kids. It's like very challenging, which was a positive. Across the board, they said we bring consistency, help all level learners. They really like the different levels. They were concerned about the phonics component of it. Again, we're new to doing phonics. We're seeing one program. We haven't done this one with Fidelity yet, but they're concerned that some of the levels of phonics are a little bit low in this. Just phonics. Remember, there's multiple levels.
There's 5 different components of
all it is. So phonics is one component. You know, I was on Karen and I were in a conversation today and somebody brought up, it was with SUNY Albany, and they brought up, you know, like blood pressure medicine. Phonics is not science of reading, right? There's multiple components of it. And if you only do phonics, it's like, all right, well, having good blood pressure is good, but we're not gonna put everybody on blood pressure medication, right? Everybody's gonna be on different ones. So that's why having it very balanced is important. All the teachers went around kind of shared that. They endorsed the program. They talked about Albany School District having, using Wonders already.
which we didn't know about.
Which we did not know about, and that's an important component of that because I'm gonna tell you what I did with follow-up in a minute. But really, all the teachers felt that it was important to have a program. I asked them if there were other programs they wanted to look at. They said no, they didn't know of other programs. I told them we would, if they endorse phonics, endorse this, I would endorse it. They endorsed it. And I feel comfortable in moving forward with the program. Did I miss anything, Kelly?
No, I do just want to stress that the two concerns that were echoed consistently at every grade level and from our psychologist were the concerns about the phonics, and that a suggestion was made that because there's a phonics program being used now in with a lot of success, that the YouFly program, that the district provide an opportunity for some teachers to work this summer to align it, rather than wait until we try it, see, find the gap is really there, and then try to align it, because then you're playing catch up. So that suggestion was made in the meeting, which I thought was really important. And of course, the other concern always is PD, is just having appropriate PD outlined. But in terms of, was this the best of the programs that they've looked at? Yes. Were there, the differentiation looked strong, from your lows to your highs. So a lot of good things were being seen around the room.
You know, again, some of the concern came up of, is this, you know, everybody's, you know, stand and deliver kind of teaching too, right? Like, we don't want this to be where the teacher just does one thing and the kids are in front of it. And everybody agreed, it's the teacher in the room that makes the difference, right?
Oh,
You know, and our teachers are very strong and they know how to be able to manage their program and also teach reading, right? And walk through this. Another thing that we brought up was the DEI component and the NYU study. I asked them how they felt about it, and they didn't see any major components or concerns. But Albany is very important. I want to go back to that for a minute, but I also want to talk about the PD aspect of it. You know, we do have the PD money that we built in. We also put in that money that we had for the high impact tutor, that now we don't have to, right? That was about $55,000. That $55,000 can be utilized as for an embedded coach or for coaching.
why do we not have to?
Because legislation states now that they don't have to dictate the high impact tutor.
So it was being pulled out
Yeah.
of the foundation.
It was already general fund, it was already there, but they were telling us how we had to use it.
I remember that now.
That doesn't have to happen any longer. So we can use that now for consulting work, right? So we
Sure.
can have embedded consultants come in and even help teachers even more, which is positive, right? That's another addition to the PD component that they're asking for. So I think that's a really good thing. So questions so far on any of this?
I'm very happy to hear that there was sounds like pretty unanimous support.
Yeah, so it was, I mean, there was one person who, again, who had dissenting voice, but even that person said there were positives to the program as well.
Okay.
So, and I already shared that, the comments of the dissenting. So, Albany. So we reached out, I actually have colleagues that work in Albany, so, and at elementary schools. So I reached out and I actually trained, that's okay. So one of the colleagues is actually, was my very first assistant principal. So we've known each other for a very long time. And I reached out to them saying, hey, can you teach us about wonders? And do you mind if we pick your brain about all this? So she's at Giffen Elementary School in Albany. And herself and her instructional coordinators made some time for us on Friday of last week to sit down, and we really got to pick their brain. Myself, Karen, and Jeff got to pick their brain on wonders and how they felt. So the full Albany School District uses wonders. You know, and she talked about they've been using it for 7 years. They use the
2017.
They use the 2017 version, which is much, much different than what we have with the rigor. So some of the work that they've done over the few years has already been done with Inside Wonders. So the alignment and changes. They did give us a couple concerns. Like they said, you know, we learned this already, or we learned that. And they said they would be more than happy to help partner with us as we roll out this implementation to help us learn. And we've already shared some of the resources like the cultural responsive lessons, the
They didn't have
bibliography.
those, so they would do some of that themselves
Yeah.
to
Right.
kind of echo some of
Yeah,
those.
and bring up the DEI stuff is I asked about the DEI. And I said, so tell me, how do you feel about it? They're like, oh, our teachers have noticed some of it, we just supplement. You know, if we see something that we want to add and we know our students that are in front of us, we supplement those materials. Prime example that they shared with us, what I thought was great, is there's a story that goes, Happy Birthday America. And that's coming up and they utilize it. Well, we just use it. They have this story from Juneteenth that I think they shared with you already. And it's a story about Juneteenth and they add that in as well. So that's how they get that cultural diversity component. So they were doing it on their own, understanding, the cultural work. And again, Albany's been doing equity work even before they called it equity work, right? It had a different name 15 years ago, but they were still doing that work with the DEI stuff.
Let me ask you, you're using a 2007, they're using a
Yes.
2017 version and supplementing it.
Yeah.
Is the version we would be purchasing, I'm assuming a 2023 type,
2023, yeah.
has that incorporated
It
some of
has
that
some of
kind
the
of stuff?
incorporations in, but as the NYU study showed, it still has a couple deficits.
Okay.
So we would do that. For example, I don't even know if we're doing this now, is this idea about Juneteenth, adding in those stories for Juneteenth to be able to supplement, to be able to help our students understand it.
So I think Albany talked about voice, right? And whose voice is being shared here. So in the Happy Birthday America, it was exactly probably what I would have read, right, when I was in school. It was the one major culture, dominating culture voice. And so they've said, you know what else we're gonna do? The next story, we're gonna remove that, we're gonna put in this Juneteenth story for students. So I think what they've just done over the years has been more flexible. And I think they said, year 2, we started doing this. Year 3, we've added that. And the 2017, we know didn't have the amount of rigor that the 2020, I think, version does. So the version before this one. The 2023 also has like social emotional pieces to that have been, so it just keeps getting better where they've added more and more pieces to it. So they saw something lacking, they supported it. Frank, you asked, is this something you guys would be continuing with? And they said, absolutely. This isn't like, okay, we're done with the contract, we're dropping this. This is the thing that we want to continue to work with.
Since it's such a large spend for them, they're not buying the newer version because again, it's district wide there. So that's a lot larger than what we are doing. But, I asked those questions and it was positive. It was a positive kind of feeling. And I appreciate it because one of the teachers, it was Mary Beth Counterman, correct? She mentioned that she spoke to somebody about it and they were talking about it. So that she brought it up at our meeting. Again, the meeting was really very informative for me because I got to understand their perspective better. And I just thought it went very well. So I have no reservations about.
Do they feel like, I don't know if this is a fair question, but do they feel as if their students are actually benefiting from the use of this program?
Yes, they do. They brought up something I thought was
Their
super
reading
important.
scores satisfactory
Yes,
or improving or?
Giffen is a receivership school.
Yeah.
Not all of Albany is. So again, Albany all uses it. So Giffen is a receivership school, and there's multiple reasons why and issues that go along with that also in the reading, but they're seeing growth in their reading programs. So, they're seeing that again, it really is the student in front of you, the kids that you teach and how you teach it and understanding that data is important. So how you use that program, you're not just teaching a program, you're teaching the students in front of you. The program is the resource, right? And I think that's an important thing that our teachers truly understand. I did ask about the materials and I want to share it because it was a kind of an aha moment for me. One of the major concerns was that, there's so many materials and so much to work through and it was so overbearing. And I asked them, and specifically I said, so how do you help your teachers understand the resources and walk through them? And they say, well, our teachers help the students understand what materials they need to use. So they took it like from the perspective of how do we get what resources do we need for our students? And then they kind of like, UBD'd it. They designed it by what the students need for those resources and how they can manage them. And then they did it that way. They did say like, it was a little cumbersome at first, but they figured out what they needed. But then they had anthologies, they had all these other materials already. I don't think we have as many materials as them, right?
Well, we do a lot of we kept pieces because when we don't, even though they're outdated, you still pull resources from them. So it's that permission to purge those things from classrooms.
Right, because there's been a history of not replacing or a history of not really
adding on, but
adding on or
still
doing
do
those
what
things.
they
So
like
I think it's
do.
important that, and I applaud the board on this, is that we supported the instructional needs and strategies of our students, and we've been planning and budgeting appropriately to make sure our teachers have the resources that they need in their classroom. So they're not piecemealing it together and they're not buying their own libraries.
And we can count on a student by the time they get through 5th grade, certain pieces will be the same, right? So it's not a matter of, did you read about this? Did you read this story, we were talking about this with Juneteenth today, and maybe this teacher, maybe Kelly Lundgren's in the classroom and she pulled it and she taught it, and Karen Conroy's across the hall, but that wasn't a read aloud that I did. So certain kids will have certain things. So, you know, we'd like to say that you're still gonna allow for that flexibility of differentiation and give students exactly what they need when it's in addition to, but what are the pieces that everybody will have had that same experience, and it'll be more consistent that way.
And I think one of the conversations we had with the staff was important, because one of the teachers piloted Wonders, did it for a very long time, and, you know, found some very strengths with it, but she also stated that, you know, she's afraid that people are gonna go to those those level readers and just take advantage of it. So understanding what the need is really important. So, you know, when she's.
Yeah, and then it really depends. I mean, and that's part of the bigger conversation we just listened to with University of Albany, you know, like, it's easy for that pendulum swing to go, you know, we weren't doing that, having the attention on phonics. Now, all of our attention's on phonics.
Where do you
We
get those
don't
5
want to
credits?
let go of rich literature. We don't want to stop teaching the skills for reading. We want all those comprehension pieces as well. There's a place for, possibly for the leveled books, but maybe it's not in kindergarten, or maybe it's when you're only pulling them out to teach a specific skill. One thing that Albany said was, we're not using them as much, I think they said, because what typically happens is, many of those kids who struggle, and she may have a number of those, in where she is, because, she was talking about not having them all in the below levels, right? Or the on grade levels, but being sure that they're hitting all grade level skills and all grade level, opportunities for grade level. A lot of times we do so much differentiation that, there can be students who, whether they're, struggling or just not big readers or whatever it is, don't get the opportunities to have the, that grade level conversation, that grade level comprehension. So a place for leveled readers, but maybe not as much as what we used to put the emphasis
So
on.
you're sold on Wonders.
So again, the committee all had the conversation. I support the committee's decision, because I'm not, again, I don't teach reading. I couldn't even tell you how to start doing the program, right? That's not my forte. So I have to trust in the educational professionals. And, you know, they were sound, and I trust in them. And, you know, what I said to them is what I'm gonna say, you know, on recording too, is, you know, I don't want someone to say, well, oh, they made us do it. No, we all looked at an educational program. So, you know, I want them to feel understanding that it's not Tim's fault that we're doing Wonders. It's, we're looking at a program that we all feel comfortable in, that will help support our students better.
Well, and I think that we learned at previous meetings, there's been a lot of looking at a variety of different programs. And I know Wonders has been around a long time, and Albany use it, but I forget, McGraw Hill told us how many districts they're in,
Oh, yeah.
you know, nationwide,
Yeah,
it's
nationwide.
everywhere.
Right.
Robin, any questions that you have,
I do.
concerns?
What is PD gonna look like for teachers?
So we have to work that out next.
Okay.
And we're gonna start that progress on Monday of next week. So we're gonna have to figure out, how's it look, what does it look like for next year? Is it embedded? Who's gonna do summer work? Is it gonna be synchronous or asynchronous? How are we gonna utilize a consultant to get the work done? What type of consultant is it gonna be? Is it gonna be an in-house or out-of-house consultant? So I think there's a lot there that we have to figure out. But we have a PD committee. We have, you know, the literacy committee. I already told them, congratulations, you're on the PD committee. Their faces were so happy by that.
They're not on the PD committee, but that's okay. They are not committed to anything.
No,
So
but I'm
that was the
saying-
conversation following up, is
Well,
that they do
what-
not have to, because they
I
spent so much time
No.
on this.
Well,
one,
let me
because
tell
they're
you-
No, but they
not
can
going-
provide their.
They're welcome to the PD
Well,
committee,
how
but they
about,
don't have
let
to.
me rephrase
What
what
are
I
we
was
talking
saying.
about?
Our
yeah.
professional development
Well,
committee.
Well, let
He
me,
invited everybody to be a
Well,
part of planning.
From the literacy committee to the PD committee.
yeah, well, here's what I actually meant by that, Tim, and I apologize if it was misconstrued. I meant that their voice is gonna be very important, and we're going to ask them for their opinion as we move out the PD to see exactly what is needed. I wasn't actually inviting them. to
Well,
vote.
they're like, I said,
Yeah, no, their voice is
You don't
important,
have
and we want to hear their voice since they've done the work already on Wonders. I think those people are gonna be the most important ones to hear, because they've already know what will work or what doesn't work for them.
I have a financial question. I know that there was money budgeted in this current year for PD, and there's money budgeted next year for PD. But our fiscal year ends June 30th. Does can this year's PD money roll into next year's PD money? How does that
I
work?
have to speak to Jim Southern, I don't know that answer.
I
Double
asked
the
that,
money would be
well, I
perfect
asked that
here.
question when we were putting our budget together for the coming year,
Sure.
because we had it sitting there and we haven't expended it yet.
Yes.
And I think we were of the impression that it was going to be, it didn't sound like it was,
I'm sure, I
it
don't
sounded
want,
like you could roll it in.
I don't
It
want to
hasn't
say
been
yes or
spent.
no.
It hasn't
Yeah,
been
it
spent.
hasn't been spent, but
Right.
again, it's fiscal year to fiscal year. So Jim understands this much better than I do, and there might be a nuance to the answer that's
Mhm.
given that I would get wrong.
Okay, all right.
And I don't want to get a fiscal question wrong on recording, right? I'd rather Jim have that answer.
I think what I would hope the
Yeah.
answer would be, and I'm not gonna presume it to be, but we'll spend what needs to happen in order to do PD right. You know, and that might be what we put away for this year, plus what we're gonna, for the following year, or maybe we don't need all of that.
And possibly,
I don't know.
I don't want money
Right.
to be in the way
Right.
of,
No.
and
And
it's,
I think it's also the union money wasn't utilized this year either, right?
Right,
The
but
teachers association
we're
money, so we could share some of that PD money as well.
sure, this year's especially.
Yeah.
Can
And
have
next
all
year's
of it.
possibly. For the contract, $25,000 goes to PD for the BTA, for them to be able to utilize as they so wish to. So there is funds there that we could have a conversation about as well.
Let's make sure we do that right.
Yeah.
Will
Robin,
the
more
teachers
questions?
have an opportunity to see the teachers in Albany using it?
We have not.
Oh, okay.
We
I
just
didn't
found
know
out
there-
about it
there
last
was-
week.
I know it's very,
And
that's why,
honestly, in our and yes,
this is
our,
pretty recent.
Yeah,
the visit that we did was not helpful because they weren't teaching it. They were doing some stand and deliver, so it was a turnoff. I really think having worked with a consultant from Wonders, taking our time to go through that way, whatever else we may be offering for PD in addition to that, may be a better way to go than to see something not done the way you want it.
Albany did invite us in, but they said they're winding down.
Yeah,
At this
I
point.
mean, they said,
Yeah.
Now's not
Jeff
the
and I
time
wanted to
to
stop.
But they
by.
said, anytime you want to come in, doors open, they said,
Yeah.
so.
So I just feel that's usually a lot more helpful to see another
Yeah.
teacher using the exact same thing.
I'm
than-
hoping we can do some partnerships
Yeah, that's
as
what I was
well, as
thinking.
we've been
Once
talking
we
about doing
kinda
partnerships, so our teachers can maybe learn from the practitioners that have already been doing it as
Yeah.
well.
Well, and the last time we rolled out a program, we had different consultants, different trainers that were in, and the ones that were able to come in and say, all right, here's everything. Starting out, focus here, focus here, focus here. That is really important. So when we talk to the people from Wonders, when you work out that contract, people that have taught in classrooms versus people that write
Yeah.
programs
That was my question.
are really who,
Very different.
Yeah.
you know, we will.
Yeah, and we definitely take those things into consideration.
Well,
Those- Those aren't things you even have to tell us, because those are things we know we have. to
As
do.
you remember
So,
from Bridges, what they did was they took teachers who were in a classroom. The only people that they had as trainers were people who were actually practitioners at that moment.
And is that something that Wonders offers, that the people who are gonna be
We
consultants
haven't
are
had
actual
full
practitioners of
conversations
it?
yet, so
Probably no longer if they once
yeah.
were.
we're gonna start that conversation. I haven't done it yet because I
We're not-
wanted
we
to go
weren't
through
there.
this process,
Or-
right? So I haven't done it yet because I want to make sure this is the one that I feel confident in recommending to the board. This is one that, the literacy felt confident in recommending to the board. And now those conversations, I mean, she just finalized what we could do with Wonders and what some of the salary, the bill was and how much it would cost.
Yeah.
So now the next step is going to be me having those conversations and working through, what they offer and how they offer it for people. So I just haven't done it because I haven't done the timing yet.
Robin, anything more?
Not at
Yeah.
this second. I'm
We'll
thinking.
circle around again.
Yeah.
Barbara, do you have any
That
questions?
was my big question about the consultants and what
Yeah.
role they would play as far as their actual experience.
I would even love to have some of our own teachers be some of the consultants, but I know there's some concern with that.
Well,
Do they have the complete knowledge of the
Well, it's
program?
not, they're not, that, somebody here wouldn't be a
Right.
Wonders person.
a
so that's
consultant down
different
the
thing.
road, I think
Yeah.
would be beneficial, but we want to tap into the expertise of
Exactly.
the Wonders people, so that if we're taking on this program, that we are trained properly in
They know the
delivering it
resources,
to
they
its
know what
best
to give, yeah.
ability.
And that $55,000 that I was talking about can be utilized for that as well.
Yeah.
So there's money we have set aside to make sure that we're doing what we
So
need
to
do.
have somebody in-house
Well, yeah,
from, I mean, versus doing, the in-house for one or two times and then everything else is virtual. It's really nice to have somebody come into your room and then debrief afterwards. We've done that years ago, and to have that time, building in subs, you have to have all those
well,
things.
here's the number one thing I will tell you, I don't want it to fail. right? So we're gonna do
We're gonna
everything we
support it.
possibly can to make sure that it's successful, right? And that's, I think that's important, because we're gonna pull out all the stops.
I appreciate you saying that, and I really appreciate that this is a priority. Most of you are all professional educators. I'm not, and, you know, I'm hearing about this, the science of this right now for the first time. But I do know how important early reading is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know that that is a skill set that if you don't get that early on, you're gonna have problems for the rest of your life, probably. So I really, for me, and I think obviously for you, this is a high priority. We gotta get this right. And our kids will benefit so much if we have, I think they have a good program now, don't get me wrong. But I do think we can strengthen the program with this.
And I believe everyone that was at that literacy committee
Felt the
felt
same
exactly the same way. Yeah.
So can I ask a question though? When you were saying that, so I mean, talking about resources, right? We know that Albany is offering this program, although it being an earlier edition.
Mm.
When they were saying that they were winding down, were they just talking about the
The
school
school
year?
The school year
Okay.
winding down, yeah.
Yes.
Not
the
that
school
they're
year.
moving away from.
No, because now
Like at
it's
this
like
point
May,
to
so
come
at
in and
this
see
point,
them.
it's gonna be a little bit different because they're not going to be focusing on the same things they would have been in December.
But they're happy enough. with
Oh,
this
no,
program.
I
They're-
asked,
they're-
are
Very
you-
happy.
Yeah,
might
so
not
I
have been
asked,
here.
I specifically
They were
asked
singing
them,
the praises.
if
They were,
you
okay.
didn't want
I'm
it,
sorry.
if you had a choice, would you get rid of it? And they said absolutely not.
And that actually, it's really nice because it underscores what I'm pointing there, because that's where
Yeah,
Mary
and
Beth.
by the way, it was
Where
Giffen
Mary
Elementary,
Beth-
Barb, is who we spoke to.
When Mary
Understood.
Beth was talking about her friend from Albany, she was
We
saying,
didn't know
oh, I
which school
love
she
it, I
worked
really,
in, by the
yeah.
way. I never asked.
We
so
didn't
don't-
ask.
We didn't ask what school she
No,
worked in,
we don't know
so it
which-
might not be the same school.
No,
that
it might
we
not be the same
contacted.
school, but here was somebody who was in practice in the city,
But it is
using it,
nice to know that
saying,
they are using it.
oh my God, I really
Yeah,
like it.
it's
Now
nice.
that I've
It's-
used it so long.
That's a
it's
very
so-
wide scale on multiple levels of schools, right? Like, it's all over the place. So
Yeah.
They have, I don't even know how many elementary schools.
Other questions, concerns?
Barbara, and I appreciate the board giving me an opportunity to table it, go back and have a conversation and move forward. That time was important. I do appreciate that.
I do too, and I think you did it right. I'm really happy that you took the time to look further into this, to sit down with the literacy committee, to go visit Albany, do a little more research, and I think now your recommendation is even stronger.
No, I feel much more confident now.
And do we feel like if there was any hesitations from anybody from the literacy committee, like all of that stuff has been addressed probably like through this visit with Albany or any other questions?
Well, they
you
didn't
We
go.
haven't visited
So
Albany.
it was that,
have? Or the
the
conversation.
reason why I was able to reach out to somebody in Albany so quickly is because actually my colleague,
Right.
who was my former assistant principal, actually has worked at Giffen for 8 years now.
Yeah.
So I was able just to reach out and say, hey, I need a favor. I need to pick your brain.
Yeah.
And this woman I highly respect her, and she would tell me how it is. She wouldn't just tell me, oh, I like it because she's talking to me. Aaron met her.
No, I know.
She would, if she didn't like something, she would flat out tell me she didn't like it. And,
And I realize.
but I
literacy
think the
committees
committee
overall-
itself, though, I feel like their voice was heard, and I felt like they felt validated.
Every person on the committee had pros and cons. The cons were pretty consistent about the phonics and the PD, just undertaking something new and what that would look like. Even the DEI piece, as we met as a committee, I had never sat in any of the literacy committees. I'm not on that committee. But it was said that when they met with the company and they had kind of an instructional meeting where it was talked about that they felt much better about the DEI piece.
I think it was
At that
our
point.
Jeff and my last meeting with them when we shared what they
I
gave
know, I
us,
think there
right?
had even been, I'm not sure, I wasn't
Yeah.
at those meetings,
That-
but
That's what it was.
they did feel better about that component.
I gotta believe that DEI comes up
Well, we're addressing it.
everywhere.
Well, and.
But I mean,
it's-
I'm talking about nationwide. I mean,
Sure.
McGraw Hill is,
Yeah.
marketing this everywhere. And it's gonna be a
But-
different aspect perhaps of DEI,
But-
but it's probably gotta be an issue that
Like-
comes up practically
But the
everywhere.
good thing, though, is like this now, and I'm very happy, to be honest with you, about this conversation, because it brings it to the forefront. We've done a lot of work over the past few years about this conversation. It's been a little overbearing sometimes, and it's hard because change is hard and working through things. This is a great catalyst to continue to move our conversation forward about DEI. So, I think it's the perfect timing for us to walk about this. And as we're doing the reading program, talking about how we're doing some of the work as a Read a Hand, and how we're doing some of these issues and how we're pushing it forward, it's positive.
And you think about an early childhood reading program, that's a really good tool for introducing the concepts behind DEI. I mean, you're getting kids when they're reading, learning to read and learning concepts about culture at the same time, that I think could be such a positive experience.
Well,
And just have, I'm sorry.
and despite not having a reading program per se, up until now, teachers have been doing these things. Just the fact that our community and our classrooms are much more diverse now than when I started 20 years ago. Teachers have naturally worked to make sure students are seen in books and that they're exposed to cultures, and this will, the hope is that this kind of brings everything together so that there's less digging and it's kind of all in one place to make it more accessible to teachers.
And some of DEI isn't just about the cultural aspect of it, it's about the consistency aspect, right? When you're having varying consistency of what students are getting, you know, it's not equitable, right? So if we can level it, and then after we level it, say, okay, what does this child need? What does this child need? And how do we differentiate that? And, you know, that's huge. So I think this is it's a positive step for us.
Yeah, it is. Anything else from the committee? I don't know what we are supposed to do to conclude here today.
That's it. As if you're all set, I'm gonna work with our attorneys.
Is there any reason why
contract.
we, as members of the board, would have a problem with Frank bringing this forward for board approval?
No, I think that we've hashed this out a lot.
Yeah.
It's been a long process and a thoughtful process, and I think we've addressed every concern. Everybody's talked about this in a million ways, and it sounds like this has been arrived at in a great way.
You got
Next
Go.
step.
green light. You got the green light.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Frank, Karen.
That was very
Thank you
good.
so much.
All right.
All right, you guys.